Hi, Jason Knott with CE Pro, and I'm excited to be joined today by Tim Sinnaeve, Managing Director at Barco Residential. Hi, Tim.
Hi, Jason. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for joining me today. Let's talk a little bit about this concept of the digital canvas that you speak to integrators about. Tell us a little bit about what that's about.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me today. Um, I guess the whole thinking comes out of the fact that I think as an industry we tend to focus too much on the technology and the product. And when you look at where the growth for our industry is going to come from, my impression or my belief is that I think we're only hitting 5% of our potential in terms of what we can do as an industry. And I think that's linked to the fact that we are focusing primarily on technology and products, which should be part of the how, obviously, but which is not really part of the what. So, in my view, the key to unlocking the rest of the potential in the industry really lies with architects and designers. And architects and designers, they don't really care much for technologies and products. So it's really what kind of experiences can we create, and how does that fit into their design experience. So how can we turn what we do, audio video if you will, into a design material for architects and designers. So that was kind of the background of the thinking. And so when you think about it that way, you go like, well, it's not really about whether it's projection as a technology or whether it's direct view LED as a technology. It's really about creating a digital canvas that can be used for a variety of experiences, and then integrating that digital canvas into the design and architecture of the home. And then whether that experience is a home theater experience, whether that experience is, for example, new media art, which is something that is close to our heart, or whether that experience is gaming, it doesn't really matter. We create those experiences on a digital canvas, and then what technology we use to create that digital canvas really depends on what is the experience that we're trying to create, how do we want to integrate it into the design and architecture of the home. So the technology is really part of what. And in my experience, when you talk to architects and designers and you talk about the digital canvas in the way that I just did, it instinctively makes sense to them. Whereas if you want to talk about the technology itself, you will quickly lose people. So I guess at the heart of it is really how do we turn the technology that we do as an industry, how do we turn that from a necessary evil, which is how it's seen by a lot of architects and designers, how do we turn that into a design material for them? And the concept of creating a digital canvas, I believe, is a very good way to do that. That makes a lot of sense to that industry.
So once an integrator's had that conceptual discussion with an architect or an interior designer, what do they need to have on the technology front to create these digital canvases?
Well, I think there's a few things that are important from the integrator perspective, and as you say, I think the first one that's really critical is to know your own materials, right? Know the technologies that you're working with. So you need an extremely good knowledge of projection technologies. You need a good knowledge of technologies like direct view LED or tiled LCD, and really understanding the differences between those technologies, because I don't believe, for example, as you sometimes hear in the media, is people go like, well, direct view LED is going to replace projection, for example, which is not something I subscribe to, because they're different technologies. And especially when you look at it from a design perspective, projection and direct view LED can enable different things. There are things that you can do with direct view LED that you can't do with projection, and vice versa. So I think that's the first step, really know your material. But then second point, I would say, at least equally important, and which is probably where we have the biggest challenge today, is to then really understand from the designers and the architects' perspective, how do you use those materials, how do you use those technologies, so that you really understand the context of an architect and a designer, so that you can really bring those two together. And in that way, for an architect and a designer, an integrator can become a really good resource and more of a partner in the design process that brings all of that knowledge, but also understands how all of that fits into the work and the objective of a designer and an architect. So those two elements are almost two sides of the coin. And then thirdly, I think, which is of course important and goes a little bit wider, is that we have to understand what we are selling, right? We are not selling products, we are not selling technologies. We are selling experiences, and those experiences take place on a digital canvas, and that digital canvas needs to not only deliver that experience from the best to the best of its ability, but also needs to be integrated into the design and architecture of the home in a way that makes sense.
All right, let's talk some specifics from a Barco perspective. What are some of the things that you're bringing to bear that enable integrators to create these digital canvases?
Well, I think there's a few elements. I think the first element is, as a manufacturer, we really have the full range of technologies. So, while a lot of people perhaps look at Barco primarily as a projector manufacturer, and of course projection is extremely important for us. But we also have direct view direct view LED. We also have tiled LCD. So we have the full range of core technologies that can be used to create those digital canvases. And that's not just display technologies, that's also image processing and everything else. So from that perspective, I believe we have all the raw materials to create those digital canvases. The second thing is that when we look at that innovation, obviously, we focus on things like image quality, we focus on things like brightness and all the traditional things, but we also focus on what can we do so that we enable more possibilities in terms of architectural integration specifically. And when thinking of projection, for example, then I'm thinking about things like making sure that we have a full range of different lens options, including ultra short throw and those types of things, so that already there you create a lot of options in positioning of the projector, where the projector can be in relation to the screen. And the more freedom you create there, the more freedom you create from an architectural integration perspective. Then I'm also thinking of things like a very advanced working and blending engine that is built into our projectors, which I believe is quite unique in the industry, which then adds even more possibilities in that, in terms of where can I place the projector while still having a perfect image in terms of quality, aspect ratio, size, and all the rest of it.
Other than the innovations that Barco has in its own projectors, what else are you doing out there in the industry with industry partnerships or other things?
Well, and I think people that have followed us and that have seen us at CEDIA have probably seen this, but we try to take a very broad view of creating that experience that I mentioned before, not just focusing on our own little part. So that's where we will partner with like audio manufacturers, even furniture manufacturers, to complement that whole experience. And sometimes also in terms of product development, that can get very specific. So one example that I'm thinking of is a collaboration that we have with certain partners to create systems that help us integrate the projector, for example, into the ceiling or into the wall. So looking at mirror systems, looking at projector housings and things like that. So we partner with some of the leading companies in the industry to make specific solutions that are really designed for each other, so that we can really hide everything but the experience, if you will. And so that's a very important part of our strategy in that respect as well.